today's video clip will model how to compare fractions. And of course, when we talk about comparing any kind of numbers, it means to look at whether they are greater than, less than, or equal to. When looking at fractions, we are first going to start with numbers that have the same denominator. When we look at the fractions 2/5 and compare it to 3/5, we can easily see that 2/5 is less than 3/5 because they have the same denominators, and we can just look at the numerators and compare those. We know that 2 is smaller than 3. This process changes, however, when we look at fractions that have different denominators, such as 2/3 and 3/4. Now, if you refer here to the chart, there are 3 steps that you can use in order to compare fractions. The first step is to find the least common denominator, or as we have been working with, the least common multiple. To rename the fractions, and I use the backward Z, which is not a mathematical rule, but it's just a strategy that I use in my classroom. And then the last step is to just compare to determine whether it is greater than, less than, or equal to. So the first thing we want to do is take our denominators. We have 3 and we have 4, and we want to use our multiples in order to figure out what our LCD is. So the first multiple of 3 is 3, then 6, then 9, then 12, and then 15. As a rule of thumb, we just generally use 5 multiples. The first 5 multiples of 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20. And of course, we're looking for that LCM, or the LCD as we call it when we're working with fractions. And we can see that the least common multiple, or least common denominator here would be 12. Now, I'm going to take that denominator and I'm going to rename these fractions using that new denominator. And this is where the backward Z comes into play. And again, this is not a mathematical rule. This is just a strategy I use in the classroom. 3 will divide into 12 4 times. 4 times 2 equals 8. That becomes our new numerator. 4 will divide into 12 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. So 9 becomes that new numerator. So now we have 8/12 that we can compare with 9/12. And our last step at this point is just to simply compare and to determine whether they are greater than, less than, or equal to. Now that we have common denominators, we can take a look at our numerators, and we can see that 8 is smaller than 9/12, so we need a less than sign in the middle. Let's try one more. This is a step-by-step process, so don't worry if you need to look back at the chart several times as you're moving through the steps. Okay, here we will compare 1/3 and 5/6. Starting with the same process, we need to find the LCD using our multiples. So take our denominator of 3, take our denominator of 6, and let's go and list those first 5 multiples. 3, 6, 9, 12, and 15. Then our multiples of 6. We have 6, 12, 18, 24, and 30. Then at this point, we look at them and we try to determine which one our LCD is, and of course that would be 6. So we are going to rename these fractions, again using the backward Z. Our new denominator is going to be 6. And the backward Z then simply just, you start from the bottom, divide 3 into 6 is 2, 2 times 1 is 2, and you bring it over. 6 divided into 6 is 1. 1 times 5 is 5, and you bring it over. And at this point, I'm going to bring my renamed fractions up here to the top. And notice that this one stayed the same throughout the renaming process, and sometimes that does happen. So now at this point, we do have common denominators, so we can go ahead and look at our numerators to determine whether it's greater than, less than, or equal to. So if we look at 2, we look at 5, we can easily see that 2 is smaller, so we need the less than symbol here. Okay, we'll try one last one. Let's compare 3/8 with 5/12. And again, starting with those denominators to try to find your LCD using your multiples. So we have 8, 16, 24, 32, and 40. With 12, we have 12, 24, 36. Now my rule of thumb is to use the first 5 multiples, but once you get to the point where you see where the LCM is, you can stop when you're comfortable with that. So you have 24 that will be your new denominator. So let's begin the renaming process. Okay. We use 24 as our denominator. 8 will go into 24 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. 12 will divide into 24 2 times. 2 times 5 is 10. Bring it on over. So now we can bring our renamed fractions up here to the top. 10 and 24. Then at this point we have our common denominator. So we can take a look at our numerators. We have 9 and 10. And clearly 9 is smaller than 10, so our fraction is less than. Okay. So one last one. 1/2 and 2/4. This one's pretty easy, but I have a reason for going through this one. Taking our two denominators. We have 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. We have 4, 8, and we could continue, but we don't need to because we can easily see that 4 will be our denominator. So we have 1/2 and 2/4. Our new denominator is 4. Using the backward z, start at the bottom. 2 divided into 4 will go 2 times. 2 times 1 is 2. Bring it over. 4 divided into 4 is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. Bring it over. So our new fractions become 2/4 and 2/4. And we see here that this is an equivalent fraction. If you have any questions about comparing fractions, feel free to just refer back to your chart.